Hi, this is Krista. Welcome back to Made to Behold. Today we have a surprise guest, my favorite person in the entire world. Stay tuned to find out who it is. Made to be Whole is intended for informational purposes only. It's not intended to replace the advice or care of a licensed healthcare professional. Participating in this podcast does not constitute a provider patient relationship with Krista Michener, AHP Integrative Health, or any of the guests featured on Made to Be Whole. Krista Michener, HP Integrative Health, and any featured guests aren't responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from use of information obtained in this podcast or associated materials. Please consult a healthcare professional for any health-related concerns that you are experiencing. All right, welcome back. This week we have my husband Eric, who's my favorite person in the omniverse, and we are here to talk about marriage, chronic illness, and the intersection of all of those. So, one really unfortunate thing, you do see higher rates of divorce when there's disability and chronic illness, and it's a pretty heartbreaking thing. And we've been fortunate that I feel like we had a good foundation and we've continued to build on it. But I wanted to talk about some of the challenges that come with having chronic illness because really if you think about it, like, hard stuff happens in life, period, and your marriage has to be created to weather whatever storms come, and it takes two. And what I mean by that is I also am very aware that, like, we are not more deserving of this great situation we have than anyone else, and there are other people out there who completely do their part and they're married to selfish jerks, and so that's not your fault. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the things that have helped us and what makes it work. Now, one thing Eric had, I think, as a resource going for him is his family had a lot of health problems. His sister was hit by a car when she was 3 and was disabled, and he saw his parents weather that and stick together. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how it impacted you and your expectations for marriage?
Yeah, I think I was 9 when my sister got hit by a car. She was 3, and she was in a coma for like 6 weeks, and then was in the hospital for a year, and was handicapped and required all kinds of assistance. And what I saw, the way my parents handled it, seemed to be it drew them closer together and basically closer to God, because that was the only way they were going to survive it. It also gave me kind of an understanding that marriage is sometimes takes effort, takes work, because they were constantly under stress and pressure because of that, with all kinds of therapists that be coming in the home, or special things having to do with treatment of my sister. And it also taught me from a young age that, bad stuff happens to people. A 3-year-old is not responsible for that kind of tragedy. And doesn't matter if you're a good person, bad person, like, bad stuff happens to you.
Yeah. When did you first realize that our situation was special?
I don't know that there was any particular moment. You know, our son has always had, our firstborn Daniel's always had issues. Like, I distinctly remember we were spending the summer. I was working at a law firm for like an internship in the summer. And we were living with your parents, and I came home, and I'm traveling to Cleveland every day, so I wouldn't get home till 7 at night. And Daniel's in the backyard playing and just driven. I mean, the kid just didn't stop. It was like something was on fire all the time. And I'm playing with him, and my father-in-law said, "Well, this is not normal. Like, not all kids are like this," um, which kind of clued me in that there's something going on here. Um, I don't think I understood or had any inkling of, it was an infectious disease that was causing these issues, but I knew that was, and that changed the way that we parented. It changed the way we had to interact with each other, because you were constantly dealing with a kid in crisis. Um, and then similar thing with Matthew at age, I don't know, 2 or 3. I remember him sitting up on the in church on the lap of one of his teachers, and he's just twirling her. I mean, just constantly like twirling her hair into like knots, and she mentioned to us like, yeah, this is not normal. And there were other behaviors, but what again, it was kind of like, okay, well, that kind of clues me in there's something wrong. But I don't know that I knew. Again, I don't think I attributed. I mean, we had no idea. We searched for years, and it can be very, very, very frustrating. There's a lot of sadness and loss in seeing your children suffer, and loss even for yourself in terms of you had these expectations of what your kids could do, what they could accomplish, what they would do. And with these illnesses, we didn't know it at the time, but now kind of learned. And that's one of the reasons that they all were so lethargic and didn't feel like doing anything. And so none of them ever played sports like I had done as a kid, or really did much of, a lot of social things. And so you can kind of look at that and be upset and I guess run away. Or for me, it was I, the one good thing in my life was my wife. And that made me, I mean, I still to this day, it's like the one thing where I don't have heartburn over. Um,
Got one
and I
good
love
thing
my
to go
children, but,
to.
but they
Yeah.
definitely create a lot more challenges. But even in a marriage, part of that might just be because you put the time and investment into the relationship when things are going well, so that when one or both of you are not feeling well or not doing well, you can be there. You kind of build up that reserve of trust,
No,
put
I
stuff in the
agree.
trust bank, and you can rely on that. It's hard when you didn't have a great relationship from the beginning. I've watched documentaries and stuff where, you know, there's one lady like was going through all these health things, and her husband like left her because it's like, well, I didn't sign up to be married to somebody like this.
Right.
And if you're looking at it in a transactional sense, then yeah, I mean, it's a huge stressor, and that can drive you apart. And I think one of the things, just to complete the thought, one of the ways we're able to build that reservoir to rely on is by forcing ourselves to continue to court or date,
Even when we don't feel well. I
even
mean,
when we don't feel well. So we early in our marriage decided we were going to have a date night, and with young kids, particularly Daniel, who was very difficult to deal with, it was like hard finding a babysitter. But it was like, we're going to make the effort to do this because I don't even remember the original impetus, but it became kind of like, even when you don't feel well, it's like, I'll just stay at home tonight and watch Netflix. Um, it's,
which didn't
you,
exist back then, but go
well,
ahead.
that's true. Stay home and watch a movie on
Right.
DVD. Um, it's like, no, we're going to force ourselves to go out and do something, even if not nothing fancy
Right.
necessarily. We're definitely not loaded.
We had I remember when we were in college and had Daniel, our date budget for the month was $60. So it was like $15 a week. So it was not a lot, but a couple of things that I think have come from that were huge. First of all, like you said, it was a habit. And there were times I remember when I was really sick and really down and we didn't know what was going on. I remember once going out and feeling like I'm so numb and I'm just going through the motions, but I'm going to keep going through the motions because my marriage matters. Like I cannot risk that. And I also remember it was around the time we were first married, but there were several couple friends of your parents who had raised their children. Their children grew up and they realized that they were kind of strangers at that point and their marriages were not thriving. And I remember that driving me to thinking, I don't want that to happen to us. I mean, it's so easy with children because they consume so much of your time. If you don't carve out time for each other, it's not going to present itself. And it doesn't mean that your kids might not be crying when you leave, but I do know it came to a point where they just expected it. You know, if we ever went out on Saturday instead of Friday, they'd look at us on Friday and say, "Why are you here? Like, aren't you
Yeah.
supposed to be gone? Go away." And I think it's given them security to knowing that our relationship is good. I mean, some of them have come out and
Mhm.
said that, but I do think that it is a gift to your children if you can have that. foundation and build on it. But I do think the dates are huge. I think they're huge.
Yeah, and it. Not all kids are the same.
Mm-mm.
I have several nieces and nephews that when they come over, it's like it doesn't feel like they're there
They
in the
didn't have
sense of
trouble getting babysitters.
yeah. But what's interesting about it, from that perspective, is at least something that occurs to me is like for some people, their kids may not be that much of a stressor. They may be able, I mean, their kids kind of move off on their own. They do their own homework, or they go to their sports stuff, or they're involved in the community, and it's not all consuming. And so maybe they don't feel the need to have that release of I'm going to go just do something fun with my spouse because they can kind of do that already. Um, I can tell you that that was not our situation. And so that was, I think, why, again, when you're dealing with these illnesses, you have to make time to do the things that are enjoyable. Otherwise, your only experience with your spouse is going to be going through the incredible, difficult experiences, dealing with the kid who's suicidal or listening for the 18th time of one of your kids raging about some political thing because
The brain's
you know,
stuck.
yeah, there's a lot of different things. I'm not going to go into every single thing, but it, it again, sometimes you're going to feel terrible and you still go do it because you want to keep the habit.
That's
But
part of
most of the
life.
time, you look forward to it, and frankly, it's like one of the things that keeps you going.
Yep.
And if you don't do that, if all you do is like, well, I have to be here with this kid all the time, I think you're going to get burned out,
Hmm.
and it's going to much more likely there is going to be a separation or a divorce because all you're ever going to associate with is the
The trauma. So one thing that I think is amazing about you, for those of you that don't know, Eric also has Lyme, Bartonella, and Babesia, but acquired some of this later than the rest of us, was diagnosed later, and appeared to be the healthy one in the relationship for a lot of years. But one of the things I love about him is even before he understood what everyone was going through because he wasn't experiencing it, you still had this ability to be like so compassionate and kind and not judgmental, like why are you being lazy, why are you this, why are you that, how are you that great, like how do you cultivate that being able to be
well,
kind
you're
and
so awesome.
no,
uh,
but being able to be kind and compassionate even when you don't get it. Because that's one thing I hear a lot of people say, well, my husband just doesn't get it. Why can't I just get up and do stuff? Why aren't I this? I'm not the same person he married.
I think that part of it is my childhood. I kind of saw some stuff with my sister, and then I had a brother who's an alcoholic who died of an overdose, and I don't know. To me, it was kind of like taught as a kid, like that you may not understand what somebody else is going through, and then and frankly, the other thing is just uh, I was so in love with you. Why wouldn't I believe you? Why would I not think? Why would I think you're making it up? And part of it also, Chris, you got to understand, like I, I saw you giving everything you had,
Yeah.
even though you were sick, and so it was easier for me because it's like, well, I know she's given everything she has. The other part of it, I mean, I'm sure there were times I was thinking, like, man, she's in bed again. I can't do all this by myself. I need help. But then you kind of step back and remember, yeah, well, I'm sure she doesn't want to be there. Like, that's not a fun place to be. So
No.
to me, that wasn't hard. And with our kids, it was kind of similar. It wasn't hard for me to believe that they were sick. Although I will say, there are times where, even now, it's like, you're tired, go to bed. And they'll be like, well, but I need to talk to you and tell you how tired and miserable I am. And it's like, well, yeah, but if you go to bed, you probably won't be as tired. There are still times I have problems with empathy. I'm not a
Right.
perfect person, despite what you say.
Yeah.
Um,
You're pretty
but
great.
I do think it's easier. And then the other thing is to be focusing on the things that relying on those things you built together over the years.
I
I
also
don't
think
know.
the two other things that come to mind, I think shared faith and conviction helps a lot, and also our understanding and belief that this life isn't the end, because it would be pretty hard if it was. If you thought
No,
this is all you have to look forward to, that would
I
that
think
would
that's true.
suck. It
I,
also helps that you were already depressed with low expectations for life when we got married. Like,
mm,
and
mm.
I don't mean that in a bad way, but because I think of everything that happened with your family, you were just kind of like, yeah, life's hard. You did not have rosy expectations, but I think in some ways that prepares you a little more when bad stuff happens. You're kind of like, yeah, I knew it. It was harder to get you to like see the positive.
Yeah, I think that's true.
What changed then after you got diagnosed and started treatment? How did your perspective change?
Well, so you can have sympathy for people. Um, Somebody maybe loses their spouse. I can have sympathy for that person, but I don't have empathy in the sense I can't know how they feel because I haven't been through that. So I could sense what you guys were going through, and I knew it was bad, but I didn't really understand it until I started going through it myself. And uh, then, I think the first time that with Bartonella where I had crippling anxiety, and I was like, this is what you've been living through. Like, I gave me a whole new appreciation for how bad it is. Because before it's like, yeah, I'm really anxious and nervous. It's like, okay, well, I try to soothe you or whatever, but it's not like the understanding of like, it doesn't matter what soothing you get. Like the anxiety's still there.
Right.
Um, that was new for me, but it was very helpful to see it, experience it firsthand, because then it helped me to understand people's behavior
Right.
and understand like why is it that this is so difficult for them. It shouldn't be that hard. Like,
Well, the
um,
neurological inflammation, because I think it's actually helpful and instructive that baseline, you didn't really know what anxiety or insomnia were. I mean, you knew they existed. You probably had a bad night's sleep, but I used to be so jealous because you just lay down and roll over and go to sleep, and it would be hours, and my brain
it
would
was
not
it,
shut up.
anytime I would have anxiety would always be just
Situational,
like, oh,
right?
I'm in the middle of a very difficult trial, and there's a lot at stake, and I'm just can't stop thinking about it. But as
Right.
soon as it was over, immediate relief. What I had not been through was the intense anxiety where it doesn't matter if something ends, like it'll attach to something else. Like it's the anxiety is the baseline.
Right.
That's really really challenging, and um, yeah, I can see why people drink like that. That would be like, okay, I'm gonna take a break
I'm
by
checking out for a
wiping that
while.
out. That was not available to me, um, but it makes sense why that would happen. I do think it's probably better to have healthier habits in terms of dealing with stress than drug use, just because there can be side effects to that. But I understand. It was how do you find those things to help relieve that tension? Much more excited after learning all this stuff that there's like physical causes to it that can be addressed, and that there's hope that if you can address those physical ailments or diseases or whatever, that maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But honestly, yeah, I still struggle with that because it just feels like takes forever. My religious belief is when I die, that will be gone. And I will be resurrected one day with a physical body that won't have all this junk in it. And frankly, that's what I'm looking forward to. So part of me is just like, yeah, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, which sounds a little bit morose, but it's more just this idea of like the physical body with all these. I don't know. I think the depression I had as a kid into adulthood probably helped set that expectation that yeah, life is miserable with with certain vistas of joy that mixed in, and so um, the idea that oh my kids are sick is kind of like yeah,
You're less depressed now, though, wouldn't you say?
100%.
Yeah.
I think with different things that you've helped me with nutrition and other things to detoxify and blah blah blah. Like it's not the same. When we were first married, I was Eeyore.
Right. You
all the
were.
time. And I just thought that's the way I was and no way to fix it. Um,
So what have you learned about health, medicine, the healthcare system that you wouldn't have believed or would have surprised you if someone told you 30 years ago when we were dating?
so I'm kind of a free market guy. Like that's my leanings is more like I see capitalism as a good thing on balance. It's not a perfect system. It has lots of problems, but it's the best of many bad economic systems we have. And I've seen in my own life when, you know, with technological breakthroughs and things like that, having a free moving economy allows for that creation of things that benefit all of society, right? So that's kind of the background. So when people talk about the evil drug companies, and they're just there to make a profit, I'm like, well, yeah, of course they're trying to make a profit. That's their job. But it's also look at the most dynamic discoveries and all the medicine that we're finding. Again, you assume people are selfish, um, and you build your system on that. Well, guess what? You're much more likely to have success than relying on people's altruism. So that was what my thought was. And so when people talk about conspiracy theories, like, oh, they're doing these things to manipulate in order to get people hooked, I was kind of like, yeah, sure. I think what I've learned since then is no, there's actually again the profit incentive has created a nasty cycle where it makes perfect sense for them to be worked on instead of curing diseases, providing temporary relief through a pill um, to keep you alive, um, but to not necessarily solve the problem. And I have been shocked as the more I've learned about this stuff, the lack of interest or research on trying to cure. And even when you talk to people, the latest drug and what does it do, and how many of them are related to suppressing the immune system. Maybe we should figure out why the immune system was going crazy in the first place, like rather than just suppressing it, because that can have. Well, as you listen to any ad on drug manufacturers, I mean, it's hilarious where it gets like, you know, halfway through they start listing for the rest of the commercial all the things, like do this to help your dry eyes, can cause fatal loss of eyesight, bleeding through various orifices, death, and we're like, what? And so that I think that has changed my view. I don't think it's made me more sympathetic to government intervention, because I actually think government intervention is in part what ends up creating the structures that create these profit incentives. So I'm kind of like, damn the whole system. I've become much more likely to think that it, the medical system is deeply flawed and broken, and there isn't really a particularly good system that exists anywhere in the world. So I lived under national health care in Britain for a couple of years, and that was just terrible. Um, like,
Joanne, if you're listening, lightning
yeah,
will strike soon.
if you had anything that was a little bit out of the ordinary, they had nothing for you. It was like, oh, you got a cold, here's a blue bottle of liquid to drink, and no matter what ailment I had, I got the same thing. So, and it would be 5-minute appointments, but it was free, and I know there are other people where, my friend who I taught while I was there as a missionary, like, she has had great experiences with the national healthcare in terms of her pregnancies that were complicated, and they took care of her, and that's great. But I also had missionary companions when I was serving there that had it was chronic fatigue, or one had like an allergic reaction, had all kinds of like stuff. His eyes were swollen shut, and they basically was like, "Yeah, we can't help you." So he wrote home to an American relative who was a doctor, sent him medicine that took care of it. And it's the same thing with Canada, where it's I had people who were Canadians I went to college with, and they would talk about if they needed an MRI or something, they'd have to come down to the States to do it, because it'd be like 2.5 years before they could get that there. So I'm not here saying that's the answer. I'm also not saying the current system we have is the answer, where it's driven by employers, because I think with doing that and having the insurance model we do, basically, the insurance company is never going to get. There's no profit incentive to have people be healthy, um, because if they spend a bunch of money on preventative stuff that could be cheaper and be good for society as a whole, people move insurance companies every year, every couple of years. Even my company, like we're always looking for a different deal, right? So the insurance company isn't going to cover things that like a micronutrient tester because it's like, why would I do that? Oh, but it'll help your people be healthier. Yeah, for the next insurer who comes in and quotes us out lower price. That's a problem. That's a fundamental structural problem that I think if we had more control over how we spend our money on healthcare as consumers, that would put market prices and forces on that. Because right now, if you go to a hospital, I mean, I was shocked. Like, oh, I want to do a private pay, and they're like, well, let me send you to our like financial aid department. I'm like, no, no, no. I just, what's it going to cost? And they won't tell you.
Mm-mm.
And it's like, again, all that does is it creates profit incentives in these companies that create all kinds of inefficiencies. And again, it's like, yeah, we'll gladly pay for your medication for your type 2 diabetes versus like figure out ways that can uh, maybe help you, not need all that medicine.
One thing you said that I'm going to tie back to marriage and to the health and everything, but you said, the same blue bottle for everything. I think there's a lack of individualization in healthcare no matter what system you're under is one of the main problems. But but even if we tie that back to relationships, to taking care of our kids, to taking care of our marriage, there has to be an individualized approach. There's not a one size fits all
Yeah.
solution.
Your needs are going to be different than another woman's needs. My needs are going to be different than another man's needs. We're individuals, and certain things may drive somebody else crazy that to me it's like I can handle. I think you've mentioned before when you were younger you had an eating disorder.
Hmm.
Um, your mom was so concerned about you telling me that because it like run away. And to me, when the house I grew up in, it was like, oh, yes, you got a problem. Yeah, I'm used to dealing with problems. It's a problem, whatever.
Everybody's got problems.
Yeah, that was my personality. I don't know that everybody's like that, but I will say that one thing is for sure, we all have problems. And if it's like, well, I can't be married or have a relationship with someone who did X, that's fine. You can have your own boundaries, but usually there's something, and
Right.
people all have their special uh, that they're bringing to the relationship. And I do think the individualized part, that's the other part I probably would not have believed about medicine. I just assumed that, well, we had all these double blind studies and things and these drugs have been proven effective. And then you look at kind of the lack of interest in individualizing treatment. I've seen that mostly, I think, for years with our kids. Because before we knew about these diseases, it's like you take them to a therapist. I mean, they're suicidal, right? Or different things like that. And when we moved here, went to a therapist. He's like, "Well, I'm taking him off all the meds that he was on with his prior therapist." And I'm like, "Well, did you talk to that person? Did you figure out why they had prescribed it so that we could know like if this was doing something?" And it's like, "Well, I don't do that."
It was
What?
awful. That was
I
an
mean, that,
awful
to me,
situation.
again, it comes down to you know, it takes time and effort and is costly to spend that time and effort to know the person and to individualize it. And our medical system is not built. You look at what is it based on? What the insurance companies will reimburse, which, by the way, is almost directly tied to what Medicare and Medicaid will reimburse for. So the government is already in there explaining this is what you get credit for, and there's no like reimbursement for client education or for taking specific time to figure out like the genomics. And so doctors don't do it. So you get a 15-minute appointment. Maybe you'll have 2 or 3 minutes with the doctor. The nurse comes in, does a few things, and they've got the regimen. They know what to do based on, I've seen this a million times. Here's what I recommend. And for the most part, I get why they do it, but I think it's a terrible model. And I think it's one that's like, we would be much better served to individualize treatment. You just get better outcomes. And we probably wouldn't need to spend as much money on some of these medications for chronic illness because we'd be able to solve the root cause of the chronic illness to begin with. But that takes money and time. And it's easier to just say, hey, let's raise taxes to pay more to help more people or have more people on insurance. Now it's taken care of. I mean, it's an easier thing as human beings to deal with because the real cost is just we don't want to deal with it. I
Right.
still think though there are ways. There's so much waste in the system uh, because of the way it's set up that if you had a model where even if everybody got a stipend of $1,000 you could spend a month from the government on healthcare any way you want, I think you'd have a way better system, and there would be more pushing for preventative treatment, things like that, that would benefit society as a whole. So that's
Right.
my Bernie Sanders moment, where I'm saying nationalize, but it's more of like we're already giving out government, we're subsidizing it through tax breaks to employers, through Medicaid, Medicare, all these things. We're
Hmm.
already spending the money. I just think we need less. Here's how it has to be spent, and make consumers more, give them more control. I just think you'd have a better, and that's more of a free market idea. So I'm both
You're
Bernie Sanders
everywhere.
and I would say a Republican, but these days I'm not really sure that counts as not socialist. So seems we just bought a 10% stake in a company. I didn't even know that. Anyway, that's probably not where your listeners want me to
You're everywhere but nowhere.
go. I do not.
So, closing advice. So take your three hats in the world of like chronic illness and whatever it is we're dealing with. If you were to get advice to other patients, other spouses, or other parents, what would be your advice? It can be three separate things, it can all be the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a patient, I would say to have patience, to understand that this is a long slog. That doesn't mean it's not working. There was a period of time where I did not. I stopped doing some of the things for detox, the sauna, the foot bath. I was like, it doesn't really make a difference, and then I began really struggling. And it was like, I guess it did make a difference. So keep with it. It's going to be most likely worse before it gets better, but I've been told that it will get better. Um, with your spouse, I would say your job. People often talk about being in love. I would say no. Love is a verb. It's something you do. Um, and so, if you want to help, you know, create that feeling of love towards your spouse, serve them, love them, spend time doing things for them, thinking of them and their needs. It has this virtuous cycle. I mean, that really applies to any human relationship. When you are attentive to another person's needs and desires and try to act correctly and try and help them, um, it, it has an impact on them that that's not the reason you're doing it, but eventually they will return. It's like almost impossible.
Well, and
And
I
so it's
think
hard.
along with that, because something you're good at, but sometimes you have to really understand those needs may fluctuate based on how a person feels. So I am always, my love language number one is words of affirmation, but explain how that cycle shifts when I'm like anxious and inflamed.
Right. So then it can be that what you need is reassurance
Well, it's
or
just I need it constantly. Like I always
oh
like my words of affirmation, but when I'm
yeah
not feeling well and my head's inflamed, but we've figured out, like I can tell Eric, seeking words of affirmation, I think what you meant to say was this, and like kind of coach him because nobody's a mind reader. I mean, we're all different, and of course he still loves me, but I just need to hear it a lot more when I'm not feeling well. And he's really generous then when I say that and say, yes, of course I love you. And like just coaching each other, I guess, on what's needed. Not accusing, but just
no
coaching and helping
I
each other
think I
out.
think that helps a ton. Figuring out how your spouse receives love,
Hmm.
which is going to be most likely different than the way you like to receive it. I mean, I uh, we took that marriage class one time where it was the 5 different love languages, and I always remember like, I like gifts, and so I would spend all this time and effort trying to get you the right gift, and you'd be like, oh, that's nice. And what you really wanted was a card that said the right thing,
Well, I
which
just
to
got
me
to
is like, I don't
notice
know.
because you like gifts, I had ordered you this, but it was like on a slow boat from China, I guess, or something. It got delivered today. The Snoop Dogg emotional support figurine came in the mail today, so it'll be there when you get home.
that's,
I don't
that,
I
that's
don't
what I
know,
was hoping for.
but it's funny and
As far as kids,
yeah.
finishing out your thought,
Yes.
my closing statement on that would just be to understand if your kids are going through this, you're going to have to change your expectations of what they can do, what success is. Um, and the sooner you come to grips with that, the easier it'll be for you, to be honest, because you spend a lot of time mourning that you don't have a football player in football. You're five boys, not one wants to play sports
Or watch them with you.
or watching, or you could say, you redefine success of their life and what they can do. And if my oldest child is 27 and still trying to graduate college, that's great. He can do what he can do. And there were times where his success was he was able to get out of bed and do things for a few hours.
Well,
Um,
and I think the miracle of that too, I've mentioned before, we were told you should just have Daniel put on disability. And then the fact that he's in school and doing exceptionally, exceptionally well. But then he and his sister both started talking about like moving out west for graduate school. And that's a miracle. I mean, sometimes the things you let go of will come back around in time. Sometimes they won't. It doesn't matter. I just want them to be happy and successful. But to us, the idea that even though healing's been slow, they're even entertaining going away to school is
there has
amazing.
been progress. There has been
Yeah.
progress. It's been very uneven, and I think having empathy for them is crucial, because there will be times where they're like, "Why am I still doing this?
Yeah.
You keep telling me it's going to get better, it doesn't." Luckily, you are, uh, frankly, a miracle worker, and has spent an inordinate amount of time researching and doing testing and trying to give them everything you possibly can, which has made some progress. But, geez, I don't think that's everybody has that.
No. And it's a longer path than any of us would choose, for
We
sure.
thought we thought a few months
Hmm.
when it first started, like, oh, we'll just knock this thing out and then everything will be better. And several years into the process,
It's better, but it's not all the way better.
it is better, but it is certainly not something that we have any idea when it's like
The
if
end.
it's ever going to be
Well,
close
they
to.
weren't born with healthy immune systems. We didn't know that. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
But there's always hope. That's the whole
Well,
point.
yeah. That
Made to
have
be
hope.
whole.
You were made to be whole. Yeah. Love
We'll
that.
we'll end with that. Thank you, Eric, for joining us. I love you. And
Love
everybody
it.
remember to have hope because you were made to be whole. Have a podcast question or suggestion? Text or call us on the podcast info line at 330-439-0686. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to be notified when new episodes release. And remember, you were made to be whole.